What's up, guys? Welcome back. I'm here with my friend Reza Dorrani. Welcome back, bro. How's it going?
Going good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm getting sick and tired of quarantine. I'm ready to go out to the mountains and travel the world and be me again. But, I can't really complain. How about you?
I'm in the same boat as you.
Okay, good. So all in all, we're doing all right. But you guys know Reza. You met him recently. We did Expressions 101 together, and now Reza is back to do Expressions 201 with us today. And so, Reza, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you. Do a brief introduction of yourself. Maybe talk to us a little bit about recap of what we covered in our last episode. And then
Sure.
my bro, go ahead and take it away.
So my name, everybody, is Reza Dorrani. I am a business applications MVP, and I'm here today to talk about Flow Expressions 201. But before we start with 201, let's get into 101 again and just recap what we had covered in our previous example. As part of expressions, we spoke about what expressions are. We broke down the anatomy of an expression, how an expression consists of a function and multiple parameters.
Yeah.
We looked at the different types of expressions, basic expressions, advanced expressions, and how we can mix and match them. We looked at where we could use expressions and actions. We spoke about conditions. We also spoke about trigger conditions.
Yep.
Which was basically a video that me and John have done earlier.
Yeah, and if you guys want to catch up on all of this stuff, I'll have links in the description. The 101 video will be there. The trigger condition video will be there. So go ahead and get those into you first so that you're prepared for this slightly more advanced material.
And then we also spoke about the expression editor. So now we all should be very clear with the classic expression editor and the modern expression editor and how we turn these features on. So yeah. We've covered all of this and we did a few very basic demos on expressions.
Yep.
Today, we are going to focus on expressions 201. We're going to raise the level a little bit. So the first thing that I want to talk about related to expressions in 201 is the concept of data types in flows. It's very important to understand that flow is strongly typed.
Yes.
Very important. And these are the data types that flow supports. We have strings, we have integers, which are whole numbers without decimals. Please note that. If you need to deal with decimals, you're talking about floating point numbers, which is also a data type. We have booleans, which are trues or false. Then the little bit more complex ones are arrays. You can also call them as collections. They represent, of course, a collection of elements. And each of these elements can be selected using something known as indexes. The indexes in flows begin with the position 0. So if I have 5 elements in an array, we will cover this in the demo. If I need the first element, it's the name of the array and the index at position 0. We look at this in the form of expressions. At the same time, another type of data is forms. And by forms, we literally mean the instant triggers or the manual triggers in flow where you can define your form elements. You can define your controls, text boxes, all those kind of form elements are basically where the form data type falls into. So we need to be aware flow is strongly typed and these are the data types that flow supports.
Yep. And oftentimes when you don't see something you want to see, it's because flow is expecting a different type. And so oftentimes when you're expecting to see a data point that's not there, it's because your data types are mismatched. And so knowing these things and how to convert between them and move between them is going to be really helpful for you.
And based on these data types, we have our expressions, which are our functions, categorized. So we have something known as expression functions, and these functions are categorized once again literally based on those data types. So we have string functions wherein you can perform expressions on strings like string manipulations, concatenations, uppercase, lowercase, and the other function types that are available. Collection functions is when you're dealing with arrays or collections, right? You want to iterate over arrays, over dictionaries. That's your collection functions. Logical functions is when you're trying to perform any sort of logical operation, your ands, your if conditions, your equal matches, anything that returns basically a Boolean value. Conversion functions, as John mentioned, when you are trying to leverage a data type, and sometimes you run into these errors that this data type is not what the function or the expression was expecting. That's probably because you are dealing with a string, but maybe the function is expecting an integer. That's where the conversion functions come in handy, where you can convert your data types from one data type to another.
It's probably the type of function I use the most in building flows, I think.
True.
Yeah.
Me too. Math functions is when you're trying to do some very, very simple mathematical calculations and flows. Of course, when you're dealing with mathematical functions, you're dealing with numbers. So what data types are you dealing with? Integers and floats. You cannot try and add two string variables. Although those string variables may have the numbers 5 and 4 in them, because the data type is string, they won't be supported. So you need to understand the different data types that these functions work and deal with. Date and time functions, once again, they only work with dates and times, converting time zones, adding days, future time, past time. We kind of covered one very simple use case last time wherein we tried to add days, wherein in reality we were trying to subtract days. Referencing functions are basically when you're trying to reference outputs from other functions in flow or other actions in flow. So in flow, whenever you use dynamic content, in reality, you're actually using a referential functions without you realizing it. Because when you pick the dynamic value from a previous trigger or an action, you are actually referencing an attribute or a function, literally calling a referential function to point to a metadata property from the preceding set of actions.
Yeah, we just make it nice and easy and wrap it in a Lego block.
There you go.
Yeah.
A little bit more advanced category of functions like workflow functions. So you can see things like when this flow ran, what time this flow ran, what's the ID of the flow, which location, which geolocation this flow is running in. URI passing functions, manipulation functions like JSON and XML, and we will try and cover those in our 301 or 401 course for sure, wherein we'll go extremely advanced into the JSON parsing elements in flow or the functions in flow. And these are basically the different types of functions. And now we're going to head over straight to the demo. We will try and cover a few scenarios. We will try and build it from scratch. A few scenarios I have pre-created so we can walk through those. And then we'll look at one simple use case for today.
Sweet. All right. I'm ready.
All right, let's go. Let's head straight over to flows. We are in the flow maker portal.
Yeah.
I will go ahead and create a new flow. Just create an instant flow because I want to just trigger this manually for the demo purpose. I'm going to pick my manual flow trigger. All right. I am in the flow experience. I'm going to call this expressions. What should I call this? Galore.
Yeah, there we go. I like that.
Recap from the previous exercise. When you go to settings, remember, you have to turn on the experimental features if you need the new experimental, or if you need the new expression dialog, which is available as part of the flow expression editor. Okay, I will go ahead, and this time we're going to create a very simple use case. I'm going to go ahead and use my favorite compose action, which basically is generating an element on the fly for me in flow, perfect case for demos. I'm going to click in my input. I will click on my function, which will open my new expression editor. Right here, we have the list of functions. Remember this tip from last time. When you click on this, it will take you to the reference guide for each and every function that is available.
That's the cheat sheet, man. You got to know that.
And right here are those same categories of expression functions that I showcased in my presentation. If you notice on the right-hand side, we have string functions, collection functions, logical. They are all categorized and grouped right here for you. So as part of the first one, we're going to focus on string functions. So if I click on string functions, this is the suite of functions that's available for me to leverage. Okay, let's use concatenation. So concat combines two or more strings and returns the combined string. Once again, focus on the data types, string, string, string. So we are dealing with strings. So I will go ahead and call concat. Open my function. The first parameter is expecting is a string. I'm going to call this power, comma. It's expecting a second parameter if I want to pass one. Maybe I'm going to enter a space, and it needs a third parameter. Again, a concat expression can get as many parameters as you want to pass to it, because that's how the function is designed.
Okay.
We'll call this automate, and I can keep concatenating more strings as I go along. Very, very simple expression. How did I know about concat? I went to the reference guide. I wanted to combine strings. Concat is my function, plugged it in, and looked at the attribute that it expects, which is of type string.
Yep.
As simple as that.
And now with this new builder, it even gave you all of the objects it wanted, right? Like it walked you through. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
It's just amazing. And I've gone ahead and plugged in my first expression, which is concatenate power with a space in the middle with the word automate. So the output of this expression should be, could have kind of
Microsoft Flow.
would have been Microsoft Flow. So we got this one, which is a very simple, basic expression. And of course, if you want to go and test this out right now, I can go ahead and save my wonderful flow called expressions galore. And once this flow is saved, I will go ahead and run this flow.
I think that's the best flow name. You win best flow name. Yeah, I do.
I was thinking about this before this call. What word goes well with a lot of expressions? I was like galore.
Yes.
So here we go. And here's my output. It's power automate, right? Power space automate. So it's gone ahead and concatenated the string that I provided.
Love it.
Very, very simple expression that we've plugged in.
Yep.
Let's go ahead, plug in a second expression right here. This time, let's pick something else. Let's pick GUID. So what does GUID do? It generates a globally identified unique identifier for you as a string that you can leverage. Very useful. Maybe you have requests coming in and you want to generate a unique ID for each request that comes in. Well, guess what? You could use GUID to give you a unique string that you can freely use for identifying your unique entry. And how do I use that? Remember, GUID and function. That's all I got to do. And this will give me a random GUID thrown in right here. Now, what if I want to mix them up? Could even do that. Use concatenate and say, here is my GUID, right? Just adding string, and this time I'll add the GUID function right here. So you can mix and match functions together.
Nice.
Here we go. Let's go ahead and run this one. Okay, this flow runs. Let's look at the compose action. Here is my unique GUID that it generated. Remember, the GUID function always generates a unique GUID every time it triggers. And here is my concatenated string wherein I said, here is my GUID and here's my GUID. Very, very simple use case. Let's keep going and let's take a little bit more advanced operation under string functions.
Okay.
One of them that I very frequently use in my flows is the split function. And let's read what split does. It's very important to read what they do. It returns an array. Clearly, it highlights that it returns an array. That means split, although the function is a string function, it returns a data type of type array. That contains the substrings that you provide separated by commas. So let's look at this in action. Let's head back to our flow. And right here, I will go ahead and plug in my next expression, which is split. Now, when I am trying to split, what I need to do is I need to first define my first string. So my string in this case, I'm going to give strings like power apps, comma, power automate, comma, power BI. Sorry, virtual agents, not you for now. All right. So we are trying to split this string, and I'm trying to split the string with what? What's the character I'm trying to split the string with? In my case, I'm going to split this with the comma. Right? So in this case, it's a very simple operation. I'm trying to split a string with comma. And in your scenario, it could be different. Maybe you have emails coming in, you want to split with a new line character, pipe character, whatever your use case is. Plug it in. Let's run this one. Let's see the output, and let's see how the data type actually is an array. Let's check that one out. So this one runs. And now what I want you to observe, and I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit here. Notice how the output is an array of strings. So although I provided it a string, the output is of data type array, right? So it's actually created an array. And how do I know that this is an array? The giveaway is these square brackets around my output. This clearly tells me that this is an array, and an array has multiple items in its collection.
Yep.
So in this case, I have an array of 3 items: Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI.
I think
Very, very simple.
that's the best way to describe it, right? Is just a collection of items. I think you said it best there. If you don't know what an array is, that's all it is. It's just a list of items separated by something, in this case, a comma. And so if you think about it like that, I just have this list of things, that list of things, that's an array.
Right. Okay. Now, of course, in the interest of time for this demo, I have gone ahead and kind of leveraged most of these expressions. And
Okay.
just so that we actually look at the expression also when I run the flow, I have plugged in the expressions as free text. So we also see what that expression was. So what I will go ahead and do is just run this flow right now. So I've done this, just created my expression galore for strings.
Love it.
So let's look at this. Concatenate, very simple. I'm trying to concatenate the words Reza with a space, Dorrani. This is the result that I get for this simple concat expression. We have a substring expression wherein you plug the string, you define the start index, and you define how many characters from that start index do you want to plug out. So you're trying to get data out from a string defined depending upon the start index and how many characters you need. I said start from 0 and grab 7. So Houston has 7 characters. By the way, as I run the Houston user group, that's why Houston. So that's the output right here.
Awesome. Okay.
Let's look at more functions. In this case, I have an expression where I'm concatenating the word GUID. That's why I see the word GUID on top with a random GUID, which I demoed earlier. So here's the random GUID. This has been generated for, again, this is hard-coded text. Now I have the word Reza, which I'm using another string function called toLower. So what it does is it converts everything to lowercase. So notice Reza wasn't in uppercase, but the output is lowercase.
Okay.
Same thing here. Dorrani, I've kind of mixed my case here, upper and lower. But notice I said convert this to uppercase, everything is converted to uppercase. toLower and toUpper are very useful when you're actually comparing characters. When you're using the equals operator, it is case sensitive. So do make sure you use toLower or toUpper, keep it consistent, and compare your string so you truly get the exact output.
That's interesting. I've never used toUpper or toLower in any of my flows. Very cool.
Some more expressions. One of them is called index of. So I can plug in my string and I can say find the index of the letter Z. Notice Z is sitting at position number 2. Remember, flows work with index 0. So when it's searching for the letter Z, Z is on position number 2. For my friends in UK, Z is on position number 2. Another one, last index of. Maybe I need to get the last index of a particular character in my string. I can do the same thing right here. Give me the last index of the letter R. And it's sitting on this position, which is number 8. So you can use all these things. Starts with, check if the string starts with this. Check if the string ends with this word. Trim white spaces. This is something I use frequently. There's a function called trim. So if you have text that has a lot of leading or trailing white spaces, use the trim function to trim all those spaces for you. And the split function was something that I demoed earlier. So this basically covers, in fact, all of the string functions that are available as part of the string function suite.
Very cool.
We'll cover one more case. This one I want to talk about is around collection functions. So remember I spoke about collections and we kind of described it as a list of items, an array. In this demo, I've created 2 arrays. Array 1 of cars, which is Ford, BMW, and Fiat. Array 2 of cars, which is BMW, Mercedes, and Dodge. And I have gone ahead and leveraged some of the commonly used functions in collections. Now, how did I get to these functions? Reference guide again. Collection. These are all my functions.
Boom.
There's no need for you to figure out what it should be. What are the different operations? Just go here, just fetch it. Heading back, let's go ahead and test this flow now. So I'm going to run this flow and boom. So first array of cars, and we'll have to kind of remember the values on these arrays. Ford, BMW, Fiat. Second one, BMW, Mercedes, Dodge. Very simple. These are just the make. Now my first expression is, one of the expressions I'm using is contains. Okay. and contains runs on a collection. What you can do is you can check to see if this value is contained in this collection. So I have a collection of cars 1. Does it contain BMW? And if you look at my first array or my collection, it does have BMW. So the output is going to be a Boolean, which is true. So this is a Boolean true. It's not a string true. You need to be aware of these things. Next operation in collection that I'm trying to use is a very commonly, very commonly used function. I'm sure everybody's used this. Length. Length gives you the number of items in your collection. You're querying SharePoint as a data source. How many items? You check with length. Querying SQL. How many items? You check with length. Always keep checking with the length function.
Even if you check like modified versus created, you still check with length.
You do.
Yeah.
So length of what? Length of my array, right? And what's my array of cars 1? It has how many items in it? 3. So what's the output going to be? It's going to be 3. Now there are other things as well. Empty. Check to see if this collection is empty. Maybe I've queried my data set, and before performing any operations on my data set, I would like to first check to see if it's empty or not. Here's your expression right here, empty. Just provide the collection to it and it will let you know if the expression is empty or not. In my case, it's obviously not. Another very useful function in here is called first. First gives you the first value in that collection. So in my case, it's Ford, so it's giving me Ford. Last gives me the last value in that collection. There is also a function called skip, which basically skips the number of items that you specify in that collection. So in my first collection, I had 3 items. I am asking it to skip 1. So guess what it will do? It will skip the first item and give me the remaining values in that collection. What is a collection? Collection is an array. If I skip, what will the return data type be? It has to be an array. And notice it is an array because I have those square brackets around it. Very important to understand data types and expressions. That's the key.
Nice.
Someone on the forum asked me this question. Okay, there's first, there's last. What if I want to get the 53rd? Well, skip 52 and then get the first, right? So if I skip until that point, I can then get the first value.
That's handy.
Yeah, so you need to combine things, right? Every function is not going to be available for you, but you need to know that you can mix and match functions together. Another one that at least I use very heavily in flows that have complicated expressions. There are 2 very common functions that are available. One is called intersection and the other one is called union. What intersection does is it basically provides you the common elements in arrays. So if you're trying to compare 2 collections, do so in intersection.
Whoa.
Of course, your arrays have to have the same data types. I cannot have an array of numbers and I'm trying to compare it with an array of strings. It's not going to work. But in this case, I'm trying to intersect array 1 and array 2 together. That means it's going to give me the common elements between these 2 arrays. And you would have guessed it, the common one is BMW. So the intersection would return an array, which in my case is BMW. There could be empty as well, right? It could return an empty array. In that case, I can check it using empty that I showcased earlier.
Man, you're blowing my mind, Reza. I've never used intersection either. I've done comparisons in way more difficult ways than this.
Exactly. There's intersection. You know who showed me this one? John
Who did? Of
Thank
course. Wizard. Gandalf. Thank you, sir.
And there's another one, union. Union will basically give you all the unique values across both your collections. So in my case, because I'm doing a union of these 2, BMW, Mercedes, Dodge, Ford, BMW, Fiat. So BMW is going to show up once and the remaining ones are going to come through as well. So I'm going to have an array of 5 elements. And that's exactly what the output is. Very powerful functions, union and intersection. It can save you a lot of queries and actions and flow. And remember our previous video around trigger conditions, we are trying to save API calls. We are trying to save steps. Very handy.
Amazing. This is awesome. I like this a lot. Okay, so now, Reza, this is great. This is awesome, practical learning. How do we use this in real life?
All right, let's use this in real life. Let's take one example here and just let's focus on this one. Of course, in 301, we'll cover more use cases for you guys, but let's just cover one use case today.
Okay.
So in this case, I have a flow that gets triggered manually. This could be a flow that triggers on a schedule. And let's say I have a data set, which is SharePoint, and I have a list in SharePoint. So I have this site in SharePoint. So let me head over to this site, RD demo. Let me try and see if I can copy. I don't think you can copy in the new expression editor, but let me go to my sites here. So I'm heading over to SharePoint. Let me get to my SharePoint site.
Ooh, dark mode.
Oh yeah. Site/rd demo. So let me get over to my demo site. I have a list here called regions. So it's very important to understand the data source first. That's why I'm taking you guys directly to the base. So in this case, I have a regions list. Very simple, basic list. Has a list of regions, has a list of admins defined for it, and has something known as last activity date. Okay. And let's say my use case is such that maybe I need a daily report of which regions have been modified in the last 7 days. Maybe I need a weekly report, right?
Okay.
What got modified in the last 7 days in my data set? In this case, it's a very simple example. Now, I have a flow that runs, let's say, on a schedule, or this is, in this case, it's an on demand. We have the action that can directly query your data source. In my case, it's SharePoint. I'm using the SharePoint connector, plugging in my SharePoint site. Now, the key here is something known as filter query. And I believe there was a video on this one as well, John, which you covered on OData queries.
Yeah, there's a whole big video on OData queries. I can link that in the description as well, actually.
100% check that out. I have learned a lot by checking that video out, by the way. So remember, you can use expressions in actions. You can use expressions in conditions. You can use expressions in trigger conditions. You can use them everywhere. Now, in this case, we are using it in an action. This is an action. I'm using it right within an action. How? My use case is get me all the items from my SharePoint list where the date column is greater than or equal to, here's my first expression. And we covered this before.
Yep.
Add days, today's date, -7. Remember, there's no subtract days, so you got to use add days and then use a minus operator in front. I've done that. So all I'm saying is get me all the regions that have been modified in the last 7 days. So I've used a flow in an expression. I don't have to get all the data and then write logic to filter it. You don't have to do that. Use expressions, reduce the load, reduce the query.
Get just the data you want.
Just the data you want. Next, before I process the data, more or less, there could be a use case wherein maybe I don't receive anything, right? Maybe my use case is send an email when there is data, right? As against don't send an email when there is no data. What you could do is you can use the condition operation. And right here as well, you can plug expressions. Let me delete this and recreate this. So if you click on this, now notice, although I have the modern editor experience open, it's still showing me the old school classic editor experience, in this case for expressions. And John, you would like to throw more light on this?
Yeah, so what, even though the experimental feature is on for the new builder, the new editor, what most people don't know is there's actually 17 different editors inside of Flow. And so we're replacing each one as we get to it, as we fix it and upgrade it, but it is a process to do one by one. And so this condition builder is its own editor, and it hasn't quite made it there yet, but it is on the list. We are working towards replacing every editor with that new experience. And so very soon you will see this change over as well.
Well, 17, wow, I'm surprised.
A lot, yeah.
Okay. So in this case, I need to plug my expression. So I'm going to switch over to expression. Now in this case, remember we spoke about the length function, right? Length gives me the number of items in my array. Very important to note, when you query data sources, the returning result set is normally an array. It's a collection. Remember, it's a list of items. So I can run the length function, right? And let me write length, and I'll head over to dynamic content and get the simple case, which is my value, which is my list of items. Click on OK, and it plugs that expression in here, and length returns me what? Integer, right? It's going to give me a number. It's going to be an integer. It's going to be a whole number. It cannot be a decimal point. It cannot be a string. It cannot be that. Now, when I'm using this, I'm trying to see if this is greater than 0 or not. If it is, that means there was some activity performed. Maybe I can send an email out, maybe take other actions, or just close my flow. Notice how I've plugged in an integer here, which is 0. If I try something like this and run this flow, it's going to break. So if you try and plug in a data type that does not match the corresponding function or expression that you've plugged in, it's going to throw an error. So in my case, all I'm trying to check is the length greater than 0? So I have to use an integer. I've plugged the integer right here.
Perfect.
Now, if I head back to my data set, notice I have not modified anything in the last 7 days. So let's say I pick Asia. I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to change the last activity date. Let's put the last activity date as the 29th May. I'm going to save this one. So I've just made a modification. Let's head back to our flow and let's run this flow. Okay, so I'm going to test this flow. I'm going to run this flow, and let's look at how the expression comes into picture here. Running the flow. All right. First thing, the action. We used an expression right here. If I go to show more, not many people look at this, but if you go to show more, you look at filter query, it will actually show you what that expression was. So in my case, we did 7 days less than today. So if you notice 7 days less than my current date, which is the 27th of May. Dates and times work only in UTC format. SharePoint, also SQL, CDS, they all store dates and times in UTC format. So we are all dealing with the same date format, so we are good.
Yep.
In this case, it's gone ahead and grabbed all the regions that have activity in the last X days. Now, the key here to understand is the output. Notice here, the output is a object which has a property called a value. And the first thing that you should observe right here is the array notation. That means we are getting what? A collection. And in this collection, if I click here, it will show you the different elements that I have as part of this collection. And I just have one object, and this is where my array ends. So these are JSON objects. That's why I said in 301, we'll cover this in more depth. So don't worry about it. For now, just remember this is an array, and this array is returning me an item. There is something in this array. And the next step was my condition. And remember, my condition was, what's the length? Is it greater than 0? It definitely is, because I do have one region that has matched that criteria. So it goes to true, and it heads over to the true side of my expression. And it says, yes, there's activity present, and I can take my operations. So a very simple use case, but very, very useful. Querying my data source, performing an expression right there while querying to return result set that I need as part of my flow, and then leveraging it even in a condition as an expression to check to see if there are values or not.
I love it. This is a great example, actually. It's very reminiscent. I have a video on my channel that's done very, very well. It is checking if SharePoint items are over 6 months old and then auto archiving them. Right. And so exact same process. You do it in a much cleaner fashion. I think I now need to go and remake that video and use some Reza tactics here to make it cleaner and teach people a better way. But again, fantastic example. It's about that comparison, right? It's about this example is being able to find those things very quickly without any manual work. I just need everything that's older than that's been changed in 7 days. I don't want to have to go look for it all. I don't want to have to collect that data. Perfect. Let's let Flow do it for us.
That's it. That is it for today. 201. I hope
awesome.
You guys enjoyed it.
Okay, 201 is done. Again, you guys, Reza, first, thank you so much, man. This was awesome. I actually have learned some things today that I'm serious. I'm gonna go back and remake the video and use some of these tactics here. So thank you.
Most welcome.
Awesome. And then you guys at home watching, thank you for coming and joining us. Go ahead and check the description. Follow Reza on Twitter. Subscribe to him on YouTube. He is an amazing teacher, as you can see, and he does videos all the time. So don't wait for him to show up on my channel. Go get plugged into what he's doing. All right, that's it from me. You guys know what to do. Click like, click subscribe, hit that bell so you get notified when new stuff comes out, and I'll see you next week.